conflicts are a natural outcome of a worldview of separation. So peace is a natural outcome of a worldview of wholeness, of oneness. If injustice is a natural way of behaving from a worldview of separation, justice is a natural way of behaving in a worldview of oneness and unity and diversity. That is the key. That literally turns everything on its head. And we have the evidence for it at all scales of existence. We don't have to search for this. It's not a hope. It's not an aspiration. It is our existential reality. That's what we need to understand. That's what we need to wake up to.
Welcome, Jude. I'm so happy to be speaking with you today. I've been really inspired by the work you do, and now I'm in my way of reading your book, The Story of Gaia. And yeah, I just love for you to introduce yourself and share how you got here to this very beautiful intersection of spirituality and science.
Well, first of all, Fatima, thank you for your kind invite, and I'm delighted to be with you today. And it's been what we call in English a scenic route. It's not been linear at all. It started when I was very young, and I began to experience the world in ways that when I grew up and started to work with Indigenous communities, felt very much to how they experience the world. In other words, a world of kinship and relationship. And in my experiences on multidimensional levels, which again is much of what Indigenous wisdom is founded on, that there is far more to the nature of reality than what we see with our eyes and hear with our ears. And so my journey has been very much that ongoing path of exploration and discovery. I also went to Oxford University to study physics. So I was curious, and I'm still curious, about what science can tell us about the nature of reality, and also what ancient wisdom teaches us. So my exploration has been very much that co-weaving of leading edge science, of ancient and indigenous wisdom traditions, of the nature of reality and the nature of consciousness itself. And then just for fun, I was for 25 years in international corporate life, trained as an accountant, and ended up being the group finance director of two large international companies. So when I say a scenic route, it has been all of that. And what's been interesting for me, amongst many other things, is a wonderful quote by a Danish philosopher, Kierkegaard. And he said, "We live life forwards and understand it backwards." And that's certainly been my experience, because I look at all of these, what seem to be very different threads of experience, and I see them and have enjoyed them co-weaving together to bring me to this conversation and to this work, the work that I do now, as a cosmologist, as a healer, as a futurist, as an author, as a filmmaker, but also to share what is very exciting for me is this now convergence of science and spirituality. And it comes to a perspective of the world that indeed has been told by ancient wisdom and indigenous teachings for millennia.
How did your path cross the indigenous wisdom teachers of the world? Can you share a bit about that part of your meandering?
My meandering, I love that word, meandering. It's interesting actually. I think the first touchstone into indigenous wisdom, because I've been fascinated by ancient wisdom traditions and science across all fields since I was very, very small, and that those direct experiences of multidimensional realities. And so I've read about indigenous traditions and shamanic traditions for a long time, but it was probably about 30 years ago, perhaps a little more, that I had the first opportunity to actually be with some indigenous teachers in Canada, in North America, but then in Peru with the Aini, the Quechua shamans. And then in New Zealand with the Maori elders, in Australia with the Aboriginal communities, and elsewhere, and really appreciating their way of being, not just from a personal perspective, but what really touched me deeply is the sense of community, the lived experience of not just the me, but the me and the we and the all. And that is a lived experience, day by day, both with each other and with the world and with our beloved planetary home. And, the wisdom traditions, the indigenous traditions talk of our star families. They talk of the whole world as being essentially living and a web of life. So through many years, for the last 30 years, that has been just a great joy and privilege to be, invited into their communities and learn from them.
Mm. That sounds so wonderful. And hearing you speak, what I'm really hearing is this idea that what they're expressing is the lived experience of oneness,
Yes.
that we are not separate, but that we are one with the earth and with each other. And when we really live from that understanding, it can be such a beautiful experience. And so I want to ask you, from your scientific perspective and also your spiritual understandings and experiences, how come is it that we feel so separate from one another, from the earth we live on? I mean, you could really say that that is kind of the core issue we're dealing with here. And if the nature of being is one of entanglement, and actually we are the same, we're not separate, how did we get there? Like what happened?
It's a really important question, and it's one that I've sort of studied by my own fascination with it, both an explorer and as a healer for many, many years, because you made a point there about, you sort of referenced this journey into more and more perception of separation has been one that's incurred trauma, both personally and collectively in our psyche. But what I would say is, who is the we that is separate? Because indigenous communities don't see that separation. They don't live that perception of separation. They live a known, profound relationship to everything within creation, where everything is meaningful and purposeful, and everything in existence is kin. So when you talk about the we, that's primarily the modern Western mindset. And for me, to make a sort of what has been a long journey shortish for our conversation today, I would say that it sort of began in the 1600s with the inception of the scientific method. And that to me was not a bad thing. I'm not putting bad or good on any of this. I'm just sharing what my understanding is without blame or shame, because it's brought us to this point. But the point of the scientific method, when it was originally proposed, was actually coming out of a society that was very much controlled by the church and the authority of the church, which meant that exploration and curiosity about the nature of the physical world had really been shut down for a long time. And so those societies of Britain and in Europe were quite, based on superstition rather than an empirical exploration of the world around us. And so the early explorers that were called natural philosophers in those days, before the word scientist came about, were trying to understand the world around them. And they weren't, by the church, allowed to go into any spiritual territory. So it's very much the physical world around them. And they discovered wonders. Newton discovered that the same force that an apple draws to Earth is the same force that keeps the planets in their orbits. The methodology itself was remarkable and is remarkable in exploring. And what it did, because it was shut off deliberately from a deeper understanding, a spiritual understanding, a sort of an understanding, if you like, of universality of consciousness, it actually had quite a narrow remit, and it followed that remit. And by the 19th century, that remit had got it to discoveries that actually underpinned the Industrial Revolution. But it was a remit and a worldview that was based on mechanism and materiality and perceived as separate objects in the world. Now, that worldview, which underpinned the Industrial Revolution, was so powerful because of what it drove that it became the worldview that got exported around the world. It was a worldview that, if you like, encouraged the actual understanding of a mechanistic universe into mechanistic structures of governance, of mechanisms that separated us from our planetary home. So exploitation as economy, extraction as economy, where healthcare was to make sure that people's physical well-being enabled them to work in factories and down mines, rather than holistic well-being. So there's a reason why this whole drive has continued to bring us to where we are, because it is very powerful. Its economics have been all pervasive. And so we've come to this point. But what it did do, Fatima, which I think is, if you like, the upside, because there are a lot of upsides that came with that, but there were a lot of downsides that came with that. But one thing it did do is it moved us into a perspective that we are each unique. We might be cogs in a machine, but we're unique cogs in a machine. But that uniqueness then has brought us to a point now where the science, instead of continuing that mechanistic perspective, its evidence is showing, as you were saying, that is, we're turning it on its head. We're turning that mechanistic science on its head. And what we're realizing, and the evidence is showing us, is converging with universal wisdom teachings. And so what it's showing us, that yes, we are each unique. And as you say, we are inseparable from the whole world. So as we wake up now, which I feel we are, we're able to wake up from that place both and of uniqueness. So what can we offer into the world? And yet unity in that vast diversity.
Well, you sound quite optimistic to me, which is, and that's really refreshing, you know. Given everything that's going on in the world, I'm happy to hear somebody say that you feel like there is an awakening happening, and partly I feel that too. But I would really like to hear your understanding of why things, I guess, as they got so lopsided. I mean, you know, you're talking about the beauty of this individuation or uniqueness that this system brought forth. But we're seeing also a lot of darkness that many people might uh, attribute to these globalization and modernity and these
Oh,
systems that we're living in. So I'm wondering, what is your understanding of that? Is this something that is, so to say, that diamonds grow under great pressure and that we're needing to go through this in order to come out the other side? Or why is it that we are experiencing such darkness in the world now when the nature of our very being is not separate and it is oneness? How come we're having such a hard time to really have that guide us forward in our global systems and our ways of being with one another?
well, first of all, I think it is in the darkest of times, sometimes, that the light comes in. You know, Leonard Cohen had a song about, you know, the chink in the darkness is where the light comes in. And my sense is, and being a student of history and her story, but being a student of universal journey for 14 billion years, I recognize that there are times when, you know, when things are so awful that, you know, things flip. And we've seen that in the way that evolution's progressed through the last 4 billion years on our planetary home. It's not when things have been easy and standard that that foundational evolution has taken place. Evolution takes place on three levels, three speeds, as it were. The first is quite slow, and that's been taking place, even though all the changes that we've been undertaking since the last ice age, you can say that evolution itself has been more conscious evolution, but biological evolution has been very slow because the circumstances, the environment has been quite stable. You get longer term cycles due to our planetary home Gaia's ellipticity of orbit, the wobble on her axis, the axis tilt, that bring longer term environmental changes. And then evolution takes place more rapidly. And then there are times of breakdown. And it's those times of breakdown where biological evolution has leapt forward in an incredible, radical way. It's not just been a bit of tinkering around the edges, it's been radical change. What I'm sensing now is that our journey of the last few thousand years has been relatively slow. Before that, we've had times when there have been leaps in human, biological human, consciousness human development. But now I feel this is the largest potential evolutionary, revolutionary leap in the whole story of what it's meant to be human. And it's not a biological leap, it is a leap in consciousness, potentially. And that's the way, because not only in biological evolution, but biological evolution for the last 4 billion years has progressed as levels of complexity, whether it's single cells to nucleated single cells and then to multi-cells and on. And each time it's been associated, that jump to the next level of complexity has been associated with cooperation. So we're now waking up, it does seem to me, to remember, literally remember that we aren't separate. And I'm taking the temperature of this across the world on many different levels. And that where we have been and how we have behaved is completely unsustainable. So I think there are cracks. I think there are cracks in that apparent darkness, but I think more importantly than that, there's an underswelling, an upwelling of potential. And it is in these times that I'm describing reframing instead of a meta-crisis as a metamorphosis, because the turbulence is still there. But the difference is, with a meta-crisis, you just get breakdown. With a metamorphosis, you end up potentially with an emergent butterfly. So.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. I really feel like it's important the language we use and how we phrase these things because it kind of offers a painting of what is possible. And I'm curious, when you say a leap in consciousness, let's break that down. What do you mean by a leap in consciousness? And what do you mean by consciousness? Because that's
I
kind of
love
the
that.
core of your research, of your scientific explorations in quantum physics. So
Absolutely, and this is really important, Fatima, because what I would suggest is that what science is discovering now that is convergent with universal wisdom is that we are, as you say, inseparable. We can go into that a little more, unique and inseparable. We belong to the whole world in that sense. Perhaps a different word for consciousness would be awareness. What we're aware of, we can do something about. But if we're not aware of something, we can't do something about it. So if on a very sort of everyday basis, as I go around and go to supermarket and whatever, as we all do, I'll notice that there'll be people who just throw away litter. Yeah. And sometimes I'll go up to someone and say, "Oh, you threw that away. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't aware. I didn't remember. I wasn't aware." Now, some people will do that deliberately, but a lot of people do things because they're not aware that they're doing them, or the damage they're causing, or the hurt they're causing. So consciousness is essentially, it's a level of awareness. I wouldn't ask a child of 2 years old to be able to be aware of the laws of physics. And yet they know when they tumble down, they know the law of gravity. They just don't know it's the law of gravity.
They
What I'm
experience
trying,
it.
they experience it without understanding it as such. And so we can change words, consciousness, mind. And what I'm talking about here is not our personal consciousness. It is our personal consciousness, our personal mind. I'm talking about universal consciousness. Because just as ancient and indigenous wisdom teachings speak, we now have the evidence to support an understanding that our universe can be described as aware, as conscious, as sentient, as a manifestation of cosmic mind, of universal mind. And mind and consciousness aren't something we have. They are literally what we and the whole world are. They underpin the appearance of our universe. And this is something that not just ancient teachers and indigenous shamans appreciate. This is what people like Einstein came to understand. Some of the great pioneers of quantum physics absolutely came to this view. And Einstein said, mind and consciousness, universal mind and consciousness, is primary to its appearance as energy and matter and space-time. That is what the evidence is now showing us. So we're talking about a universe that is essentially living and sentient and evolving. And we are microcosms of that sentience. So we're like, each of us is like a cell in the body of our universe, which sounds it's very shamanic, it's very much an indigenous perspective, but it's also now the perspective of evidence-based science at all scales of existence and many, many different fields of research. As you're discovering in reading the story of Gaia, it's not just physics, we're finding it in chemistry, and we're finding it in biology, and we're finding it, crucially, we're finding the same underpinning patterns, essentially, of universal mind and meaningful information underpin our collective behaviors. So we're really seeing that we cannot in any way disassociate ourselves from nature, from the wider world. We are literally, as King Charles says, not apart from it, we are part of it.
So usually when we talk about mind, a lot of people think about this thing here, the yapping thoughts that they experience every day. But what you're saying, that's not the mind that you're referring to. You're talking about uh, a universal mind slash consciousness, which is shared by all of us.
Yeah.
Uh, but can it be located? Does it have a localization? How are we? Can you say more about the nature of this consciousness? Like, where
Yeah,
is it?
it's everywhere.
Mm.
It's everywhere. It is everything. It is everything, and it is everywhere. Think of our universe as a thought, a great thought, rather a great thing in the mind of the cosmos. The mind of the cosmos has been called many things over many centuries, called God, called Allah, called great mystery, called great spirit. Einstein called the cosmos cosmic mind because he understood that the nature of it is essentially mindful rather than the physicality that we touch. If I was to drill down into my hand, smaller, 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 I would come to 99.99999999999% no thingness. What we've known for many years now, for decades now, is that the appearance of our universe, if we drill down, is incredibly ephemeral. And what's down there is not what we were taught at school, atoms made of little billiard balls, of protons and neutrons, electrons whizzing around, but relationships, and relationships of within fields of meaningful information is how we would describe it now. We would have talked about fields of energy 2 decades, 3 decades ago. We now talk about fields of meaningful information from which the appearance of the energy and matter and space-time of our world manifests. But that manifestation, that appearance, is not the deeper nature. So when we talk about the deeper nature, it's all pervasive. It literally is all that is. So for example, the meaningful information that underpins and pervades our universe is pixelated at the most minute scale. You think of our communications technologies. We're having a conversation through our communications technologies, and our technologies are what's called digitized. They utilize digitized information. They take an image of me, an image of you, and they break it down into little pixels. And each pixel has little digitized bits of information that describe that part of the image. And then they're scooted down a cable or pinged off a satellite, and we see each other. And as we see each other, that pixelated information is translated into an image of each other. Same with a hologram. We have our human holograms. They are too pixelated, and the wholeness of a hologram is actually reflected in every pixel. As cosmologists, we now understand that our whole universe is essentially holographic, is essentially pixelated. But the scale of the pixelation of our universe is a trillion times smaller than our best high definition technologies. And it does not mean that our universe isn't real. It just means that as an expression, as a great thought of cosmic mind, as a universal thought, this is how if you like, the physics of its reality is manifested.
So this what you said, that this does not mean that our universe is not real, but I guess it means that our universe is not ultimate reality.
Exactly. Exactly.
I like the way that you frame it, because it's easy to draw the conclusion that, well, if this is not ultimately real, why does it matter? You know, uh, kind of leading to this almost nihilistic way of thinking. But I've heard you say, I mean, maybe this is drawing it a bit far, but I heard you say something along the lines of, well, everything matters, or that things are meaningful. And I'd like to hear you reflect on that a bit.
I'll be delighted to, because for me it's fundamental. It's fundamental. What I'm describing is our best understanding now of how the reality of our universe emerges from deeper realms of causation and universal meaning and essential purpose. Because I would describe what we're discovering as our universe meaningfully exists to purposefully evolve from simplicity to ever greater levels of complexity and individuated self-awareness as a unitive entity. And so within space-time, there is the appearance of separation, but it is not separation, but it is differentiation. Because as the ancient tradition of the Chinese tradition of the Tao describes, in the beginning is the one becomes two, the two becomes three, and from the three, 10,000 things are born, which is such a beautiful way of describing this unitive, universal wholeness that then differentiates to know itself, to explore itself, to evolve from simplicity to ever greater complexity. And that initial differentiation into two-ness becomes an almost universal further differentiation into threeness, into trinities. Trinities, the sort of the oneness, the differentiation, and then almost the resolution, pervade the universe at all scales. And it's from those that the 10,000 things, the atoms and the molecules and the stars and the planets and the plants and the people, all of us, this gorgeous evolutionary journey that we're all part of has taken place from the very first moment of our universe's birth, some 13.8 billion years ago. And I want to finish just by saying something that I think really responds to your sense of meaning. I was taught at school that our universe began as a big bang. We know it wasn't big. That was being a bit of a joke. It wasn't big. But when we talk about bang, I mean, if I say bang to you, what does that feel to you? How does it feel to you? What's it? Yes, exactly.
Mm.
Yes, a boom and almost chaos, explosion. Yeah, that is not the way our universe began. Our universe began, yes, in its most minute, its most ordered state in that sense, its lowest informational content in that sense, and yet it began incredibly fine-tuned, extraordinarily fine-tuned, so fine-tuned with the laws of physics acting as relationship counselors, as relationship counselors to say, this is how everything comes together here. It enabled that simplest of simple universe to start on its journey from simplicity to complexity. So beautiful. So I describe it not as a one-off big bang, but the first moment of an ongoing big breath. So as our universe, the space has expanded ever since, time has flowed forward ever since, from the past to the present, and unfolds into the future. That is an ongoing big breath. And that is also what's, certainly the ancient Indian tradition, the Vedic tradition of ancient India talks of. It talks of our universe being the breath of Brahman, the breath of the creator. And we are both creators. We are both part of that creation. And we're also microcosmic co-creators because we're contributing our way of being, our experiences to this whole adventure of evolution.
How how do we remember this? Is it sufficient to understand it on a theoretical level, or do we need to understand it differently in order to really remember and have the experience of unity?
Well, first of all, I don't think we all do need to understand it on a theoretical level. I mean, I'm happy to drive a car as long as I know the wheels aren't going to drop off and I've got some petrol in the tank and I've got somewhere of knowing where I'm going. I don't need to understand how the engine works. I don't even need to understand how the sat nav works. I just need the basics that hopefully will get me from A to B on that journey. What I do need is the experience of that journey. And I like to look out and I like to see the road ahead, but I like to stop and get out and have a walk in our, in nature. I like to see the sort of, I need to know what sort of weather it is, how to whether I need to sort of take an umbrella with me when I get out of the car. My experience is what really matters. I don't need to understand a lot of the detail of how that journey unfolds. And that's really what I'm saying here. There are going to be some of us like me who are science nerds. And I'm just curious. I want to know everything. When I was a little girl, my word was why? That's my life journey of curiosity. And so it's brought me to where I am. And I can share that. And there are going to be folks who really do want to understand what this is about. I want to understand the evidence, who want to say, show me the evidence. I want to see the evidence. And that's part of what I do, is to share the evidence for all of this. But for most folks, as you were asking, Fatima, it's how do I experience wholeness? How do I experience oneness and unity and diversity? And I'd go beyond that, unity and belonging. How can I feel that I belong to this world that we're sharing about today? And for me, that's almost as unique as every one of us. I would say experience in ways that invite your heart to sing. What is it that makes your heart sing? and, you know, enjoy that. Have joy, have fun, have that sense of belonging. It could be, you know, my husband loves picking up litter. I do too. I love going along a sort of a country road where folks have, you know, in the main, without awareness, drop litter and pick it up and see that beauty unsullied by litter. I love dancing. I love gardening. You know, I love life, but I mean, whatever makes our hearts sing for me, whatever helps us to feel that we belong, whatever helps us to realize that we are inseparable. And that means really coming together with other people. And it comes together with our beloved planetary home. Because I don't understand, I don't, on a personal level, see how we can really experience oneness without all oneness, without realizing the relationships that we are interdependent with each other. So I just invite that. And then, you know, if there's an invitation or a call to deeper understanding, follow that curiosity as far as it takes you.
Thank you. That's really beautiful. Can you can you speak a bit more about the planetary well-being aspect? So this understanding of uh, an all-pervasive consciousness that we are a part of, and that the planet is also part of, and the Earth. How can that help us on this path? And what are your how do you feel about what's happening to the Earth and our way forward?
I have optimism in our way forward, as and if we are able to wake up and remember that this is who we truly are. And so for me, our beloved planetary home, I refer to as Gaia, and that is the name that the ancient Greeks gave to the earth goddess and revered her as being the primary mother of us all, which she is. And so for me, having that profound relationship with Gaia lights my days, fills me with joy. As a gardener, each season, I'm in awe of what abundance can come from a tiny seed, what beauty can come, what oh, joy can come from actually looking at a sunrise, at our beloved sun rising each day, the phases of our beloved moon over months, and you know, just being realizing that we are um, her children. And this is again the indigenous teachings, to be in right relationship with her, be in reciprocal relationship with her, honor her as our mother, be grateful to her, only take what we need and do so with reciprocal giving back, find ways of reducing exploitation, minimizing exploitation, having a completely different approach to how we relate with her. And that is happening. I mean, there's something wonderful that's initiated in the UK by Prince William 5 years ago called the Earthshot Prize. And I really encourage people to become aware of that, because what that is doing over a 10-year period of time, so we're halfway through it, is really inviting the most innovative folks who are looking to heal our relationship with our planetary mother in different ways. And they're bringing these incredible inventions and those inventions come not just from the mind, they come from the heart. And they bring the heart and the mind, the head and the heart and the hands together to serve the good of the whole. And the good of the whole is not just the good of the human whole, it is the good of our planetary whole and every being that shares our planetary home with us. And there's so much of that happening around the world. I mean, I speak at a lot of conferences with environmentalists and ecologists and evolutionary biologists. And the young researchers in these fields, in my experience, love Mother Gaia, profoundly love Mother Gaia. And they're dedicating their lives to serving her and all her children. And so for me, that's the invitation to everybody. You know, we don't have to become, we are all to become all environmentalists. It doesn't mean that that's our life's work, but it is our lives living. It can be our lives living, to live in that way, in this way, in right relationship, in loving relationship with our beloved Mother Gaia and all her children.
And somehow it seems like if we're able to remember that everything is not just dead matter, because if that's your experience, that everything is dead matter, well, then you can do what you want and you can exploit the earth. But if you really have this felt experience of the sacredness of the earth and the aliveness of all of consciousness, then that gives you a completely different way of being. Um, and I'm not
Being,
sure, excuse me?
being and being and doing, it comes from within, doesn't it? That way of being naturally then finds its expression in doing from that place.
And and when I asked you before, how to remember this, you said do what brings you joy, what makes your heart sing. And I find that just so it uplifts me so much that somehow that which would give me most joy and make my heart sing is also that which would make me remember uh, the oneness of being and of the earth and of all of us. How come that is? How come? I mean, what is the connection between our hearts and joy and oneness?
Well, first of all, my definition of love, the deepest definition of love, the biggest definition of love to me is about right relationship. Yeah. And we are microcosmic co-creators in a universe of innately right relationship, where everything is interdependent with everything else at all scales of existence and through the whole of that evolutionary path and journey and adventure that we're all part of. So there's something that is profoundly benevolent about our universe, to the extent I would describe our universe not just as living, but of loving. And if that is the most profound perception we can have of love, then when we feel love, we're aligned with that universal benevolence. We're literally attuned to it. And it is our deepest sense of belonging. We can't, fear is that forgetting we belong. Love is remembering we belong. It's like a mother's love for a child. Our universe's love is just all pervasive of its innate sentience. And so that's, for me, that's why love is foundational for our remembering. And that's why our heart is so important. I could go into all of the biology of this, but this is the foundation. When we feel love, we feel we belong. And when we feel we belong, we do remember that indeed we are inseparable from our whole universe. And of course, from our planetary mother, our beloved Gaia.
Is there anything that you feel is particularly important for us to understand or um, talk about or experience now where we are as a global community that you would like to share?
I just feel waking up to this remembering and acting accordingly. If we look at the underpinning patterns that underpin the appearance of our world, our universe, there are underlying patterns of meaningful information that underlie every complex system. So, for example, when we look at earthquakes, yeah, and we analyze earthquakes, hundreds of thousands of earthquakes, and we look at what connects them, and there's only one relationship that connects all earthquakes, that an earthquake that is twice as powerful is 4 times less likely to happen. So simple. If we graph all earthquakes with on the one axis frequency and on the other destructive power, that line of relationship links all earthquakes. Now, when we analyze human conflicts, hundreds of human conflicts throughout history, we see the same relationship. In other words, a human conflict of twice the destructive power is around 4 times less likely to happen, whether it's a world war or whether it's insurgencies in Iraq or whether it's war in the Middle East or in Sudan or Ukraine. If we're to graph all of those wars going back hundreds of years, they have the same relationship between frequency and destructive power as do earthquakes. Now, that of itself shows we cannot separate ourselves from the world, but it also shows that it is the level of awareness that is embodied in that information that then is expressed in conflicts. So if we raise our awareness, then that underpins, instead of conflicts, it can underpin peace. Because just as conflicts are a natural outcome of a worldview of separation, so peace is a natural outcome of a worldview of wholeness, of oneness. That is the difference. That is night into day. That changes everything, because it doesn't just change what would be the outcomes in conflict terms into outcomes of peaceful terms. It also is the outcomes that is the way we behave with each other, but with our planetary home. How we organize ourselves. It actually, if injustice is a natural way of behaving from a worldview of separation, justice is a natural way of behaving in a worldview of oneness and unity and diversity. That is the key. That literally turns everything on its head. And we have the evidence for it at all scales of existence. We don't have to search for this. It's not a hope. It's not an aspiration. It is our existential reality. That's what we need to understand. That's what we need to wake up to. That's what we need, in my view, to experience and invite and embody.
Thank you so much, Jude. I feel like I could speak to you for hours. And yeah, it's just really uplifting and beautiful to hear your contagious optimism intertwined with your deep curiosity and asking why and the scientific, uh, your scientific meanderings. Um, Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate this conversation. Um, and I guess I'll ask you to mention, if people listening to this would like to get in contact with you or find you, where could they best do so?
Well, thank you, Fatima, and thank you for all your work. It's and I talk about us lifting up and linking up and lifting up, and that's what you're doing. That's what I'm doing. The more we can invite, this cannot be an imposition, but it is an invitation. And so the invitation is to a website and a movement that I founded or co-founded back in 2017, which is called Whole World-View, and the website has .org on the end of it, and there's loads of free resources, loads of sort of podcasts, but also a recent film called A Radical Guide to Reality, which is free to use, to share. It's subtitled in 20 languages, from Arabic to Ukrainian. So it's to share the message. And we have a strap line called Act Local, Feel Global, and Think Cosmic. And what the website and what the invitation is to really bring all of those into embodiment.
Thank you so much, Jude.
Thank you,
It's
Fatima.
lovely speaking with you.
And you, my dear.
So I guess I'll finish the recording there.